Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Chess Beauty 99. This is a study by Liburkin, who was a teenager at the time in 1932. He subsequently went on to have a distinguished career as a problemist and a composer of chess problems. And this is a good example of his talent. This is a nice, practical-looking position that could occur in a real game easily enough, I think. And it has some lessons for us. So again, it's white to play and draw, so take a crack at it, and then we'll discuss the solution. Okay, I'm assuming that you took a look at it, and you probably checked out rook takes b2, which is unfortunately not a winning line. It's attractive enough, seems like we're stopping one of those dangerous pawns, and perhaps guarding the second rank against the advance of the other pawn, but it doesn't work out. After rook takes b2, king to b7, that's arresting the progress of our pawn, the white pawn. Black wins easily, whether he plays something like rook to a2, or instead of rook to a2, he could play king to d7. It doesn't really matter. The sequel will be the same. It will be something like bishop to e3, threatening to move the pawn forward, and then pretty much nothing that white can do is effective. Rook to a1 is a futile attempt to control the queening square. King takes b6 by black. Rook to b1 check, spite check. King to c6, king to e7, and now d2, and the pawn is going to queen, forcing the rook to give himself up, and we'll assume that black's technique is good enough to checkmate with the two bishops. Let's go back to the beginning here. So the next attempt that we might try is recognizing, well, if the rook capture doesn't work, let's bring our king in, and perhaps escorting our pawn to the queening square will provide us with resources to draw this position. And, well, that's actually the correct idea, but white needs to be very accurate. So if he's not accurate and plays king to c7 with this idea in mind, then bishop to g3 check. And now this is unfortunate because the bishop now controls b8, the queening square. King to c8, bishop to d1. This is a very odd looking move. Why would black play that move? But, well, we'll see in just a second. So after b7 check, king to a7 is forced. b8 equals queen. And, of course, this is forced as well. Rook takes b8. And now we see why bishop to d1 was played earlier. Bishop to b3 check, rook takes b3, and d2, and he can only stop one of those two pawns. Love this move. Bishop to b3 is brilliant. Let's go back to the beginning. That attempt to bring the king in is unsuccessful. So we'll now look at the solution. Now, there are actually two main variations, more or less equal after the solution, which is king to c8, as you see here. If black tries bishop to g4, which is a clever attempt to deflect the rook from guarding the queening square. Rook takes g4, of course. And black can't queen right away, because if he does, then rook to a4 is an unfortunate sequel for black. Instead, he has to play bishop takes b6 to stop that threat. Now rook to a4 check. The bishop can interpose itself. Rook to b4, threatening the pawn, but now the other pawn threatens to go. And now what does white do in this situation? He takes the pawn, but you say, well, that allows the other pawn to queen. Yes, it does. But after rook to b8, exclam, there's only one move for black, and that's bishop takes b8, and that is stalemate. So, stalemate in the one variation. So let's look at the twin variation. After king to c8, we've just moved our king from d8 to c8. Instead of bishop to g4 check, which we just looked at, alternate solution is bishop takes b6. And, of course, we want to take that bishop and d2. So it was clearing the way for these two pawns again. Rook takes b2, threatening mate once more. So bishop to a6 check. King to c7, the black pawn finally queens. Rook to b8 check, king to a7, rook to b7, move is forced, bishop takes b7, and we have another stalemate. So these beautiful twin stalemate variations that flow from this very simple position. Probably my favorite move was bishop to b3, as I mentioned earlier. But anyway, very nice study. We hope that you will join us again for the conclusion of this series, Chess Base 100, which will probably be posted tomorrow. Thanks for listening.